You're listening to Zeitgeist Banana, a podcast all about the English language. My name's Gideon, and I'm in Las Palmas de Gran Canaria. And on this podcast, you'll be listening to the amazing, the incredible, the brilliant, the fantastic me. And I'm also joined by John. Hello, John.
Hello. Really? Are you that good?
Did you like my introduction?
That was amazing. Yeah, I was like, this isn't me he's talking about. And then I realized.
Oh, God, no.
No, definitely. I agree with everything you said about yourself.
Okay. No, it is a pleasure. You know, I'm teasing you. I always tease you, John, but it is a pleasure to have you with me. You're in London with us. You're in London.
Yes. Yeah. No, it's always a pleasure. I'm jealous of your situation, but let's not go into that.
Well, I can briefly say that I am in Las Palmas in the Gran Canarias, and it's a long story, but I was supposed to be going back to Paris, but there's an epidemic of some sort there, and people can't go out that much. Did you hear about it?
No, nothing like that in London. Everything's fine here.
Okay.
Yeah, but I did get a phone call from a French gendarme and asking about you and your tax affairs or something like that. So I gave him all your details. So don't worry. You might be getting a knock on the door soon.
Yes, I'm not a tax exile, I should say. I'm an epidemic exile. So today's podcast is about cliches about Britain.
Ooh.
And today I'm going to get a few things off my chest. There are lots of cliches, and I won't say what it is, I was watching a video on YouTube about cliches about Britain. And well, it wasn't called that. It says what life is like in Britain. It was full of these cliches you hear every day. And I think, well, we better stop this because people believe all this stuff. And I wanted to go through some of the things on this list and just see if you agree with it or don't agree with it, John, and to give a wide perspective to the audience and maybe look at some cliches about some other nationalities too as well. Might come up as well, because this is one of the things that drive me crazy. We judge too quickly. We make decisions based on people's nationality and stuff like that, and it's frankly I find it a bit annoying,
Yeah, but it sounds very interesting though. I'm intrigued.
Okay, well, let's go through a few of them, and we'll see. So let me tell you a quick story. The first time I spent a considerable amount of time abroad was in my early 20s when I went to Spain to teach English, believe it or not. And I was just an English guy going to Spain. But when I went there, I was confronted with all these cliches about Britain and also myself, because listeners don't know this, but, I have a certain, shall we say, mixed heritage, mixed ethnic background. But to me, I'm English, and all my friends in England, I'm English. I was born in England. My parents were. But I came to Spain. This is a long time ago. I think things have changed. It's a bit more international now in Madrid. And the first conversations I had with people were always the same. Hello, my name's Gideon. Oh, hello, where are you from? I'm English. Okay, but where are you from originally? Or from England. Okay, but where are your parents from? From England. But what to go on every time. It was every time. And then I heard the same cliches about the weather and about the bad English food, etc., etc. And I never knew this existed till I went. And so I thought we should put the record straight, John.
We should.
Yeah. So I'm going to give you a list of a few of these things, because some of them there might be some truth in some of them. Let's see. So first of all, let's talk about English people always talk about the weather. Is that true?
I wouldn't have said so. No. I mean, I suppose it depends on the situation. I mean, maybe small talk, that would be a common topic, wouldn't it? With somebody you don't really know. it's possible you would talk about that. But do we always speak about the weather? Not sure, really sure we do.
No, and I think it's the same. Any country which has four seasons, I mean, like France, even Spain, or any country that has four seasons, the small talk will begin with something about the weather, and it's no different in Britain or France or whatever.
Yeah, well, I'm not really sure about that. I mean, I would say that it's possible we do speak more about it just because our weather varies a bit more. I mean, if you compare it to Gran Canaria, for example, from
Yeah,
what you've just told me.
yes, well, that's an exception. That's an exception. And of
Well,
course,
no, sure.
that's an exception. But I think if you're
Yeah.
in Paris or London, there's a great difference, or you're in Berlin, when you have very changeable weather.
Yeah, I think anywhere that has changeable weather, potentially you're going to speak about the weather to some extent, aren't you, as small talk, definitely.
Yeah, people like to talk about something non-controversial when they meet somebody for the first time,
Mm.
or just to break the ice. But I don't see it. But we spend hours discussing the minutiae of the winds and the rain and whatever.
We definitely don't spend hours. That's
No,
very true.
no. So we don't. So you agree? We don't talk about the weather all the time, or more than other people.
No, I don't think so.
Okay. Next one is about the weather. It's always raining in Britain. Cloudy and raining all the time. That's the only weather.
Mm, that's not true.
It's not true, is it?
No,
It's not
well,
true in London.
in London, it's an interesting one because I guess the stereotype typically comes from London as well, which always puzzles me. Whether in the past London was more rainy and over time it's become less rainy, I'm not really sure. But yes, I mean, in London, I'm sure you would agree, we don't normally get much rain at all.
Yeah, you can't tell this, even if you show the statistics, because actually in London, it's one of the least rainy cities in Europe. It's less than Paris, less
Mhm.
than Milan, less than most European cities. I think exception is Madrid, and there's one other. I was checking the list.
Mm.
And no, it doesn't rain very much. And what's funny, because I live in France, and when you speak to French people, often, yeah, I'm going on to some cliches about French, but when they talk about French weather, they'll say, yeah, oh, in the south it's warm, but then you get the wind, the Mistral coming across, and in the east it's cold, and in the west it's like this. You have the Atlantic, and and then when they talk about Britain, they go, oh, it's just rainy, cloudy and rainy all the time. They just have one weather. There's
We
no
do. We
nuance.
only have
There's
one.
no nuance. But you do have parts of Britain which rain a lot, like Glasgow and Cardiff, I think, and a few and Manchester.
Manchester, I think. Yeah,
Yeah,
even Birmingham. I mean, staying with my brother over Christmas, I realized that I mean, it definitely rains more in Birmingham than it does in London.
yeah,
That is a fact, I think, and I
yeah,
think it's you looking up all of those cities though, and seeing the rain that they have is interesting because I remember when I was living in Italy in Bologna. I don't know about Bologna whether it has more rain than London or not, but I think the key is that, for example, in Bologna, if it rained, it would rain for 2 or 3 or even sometimes 4 days in a row, and
mm,
then it just solidly. Whereas in the UK or certainly in London, it's very unusual for you to have a wet day for the whole day. It
yeah,
does happen, but very, very rarely. I mean, I guess you get showers or it rains overnight, things like that. And I think that's the reason why you get a lot more rain in other cities because it does rain solidly for a good few days. Whereas here it's kind of showers, bits and
yeah.
bobs.
But it does rain less in London. I mean, that is
Mm,
the statistics. It's
sure.
quite not a rainy city. And when I say this, when I show the statistics to people, get obsessed. They say, that's because it doesn't rain a lot, but it's always dark and cloudy and raining a little bit. So it's
Yeah.
less water. Because no, that's also false. If you look at the number of sunny days, it's actually London does quite well. It's maybe
Yeah.
other parts of the UK is true. Other parts it is rainy,
Yeah.
but they don't believe you. No one, you can never convince people of that. This cliche is so strong.
Yeah. It is interesting though, isn't it? I mean, I think it's possible that it's something to do with when people visit London, for example, maybe when they were younger, and they went on an exchange trip or a language trip or something like that. They used to arrive in kind of term time, like in November or February or something like that. Maybe those are more common times for people to arrive, because obviously in November or February, you're more likely to get grey weather, aren't you? Certainly in November, you're more likely to get more rain. Maybe
Possibly,
that's
yeah. Maybe that's why.
yeah.
Yeah.
But also maybe it's something to do with the pollution in London. Perhaps in the past, I'm talking about probably dating back to the 60s or 50s, there was more rain because the pollution helped create that. I don't know.
Well, no, I'm not sure about rain, but this comes on to my another point actually, because I did a little bit of research from asked a few foreigners before who their cliches of London before they arrived, and one of them was fog, and they thought they came to London. Goes, where's the fog? You expect it to be this pea soup fog covering the city, blanketing the city the whole time. Go, no fog. And it's there's no fog in London, is there? Like 1 or 2 days a year, maybe.
Yeah, you very rarely get fog. I mean, in fact, I think maybe a couple of weeks ago it was a little bit foggy, and I was surprised. I was like, "Oh, that's strange." It's
Because
yeah, it's very uncommon.
because it was true in the past. It wasn't fog; it was smog, wasn't it? Because of the chimneys, and they stopped that in the early '60s. But the cliche remains. They stopped people burning chimneys in the homes.
Yeah, exactly.
Chimneys, burning things
Yeah,
through the
and
chimney.
it's almost like this cliche comes from Victorian times. It comes from like Sherlock Holmes or something like that, which is curious, isn't it?
Oh
Uh,
yes,
but
yeah,
also films perpetuate it. I mean, like for example, I don't know if you've seen Paddington, any of the Paddington films.
yeah.
They would have London raining because they like to perpetuate this cliche, which I think is
Okay,
quite nice.
I like the Paddington films. Paddington 2 is a great film.
Yeah, this
This
is
is a
true.
story. Surprisingly, a surprisingly great film.
Yeah, but did you notice that they do perpetuate this cliche in the films?
Um, well, I see that cliche so often, I can't remember, but yeah, possibly.
Yeah, but also they call London the Smoke as well, don't they?
Yeah,
For that
yeah,
reason.
exactly. Yes.
Mm.
Okay, moving on from the weather, we agree mainly here.
Yeah.
British people love to queue.
Interesting. Mm.
Now, I used to kind of believe this, but I did some non-scientific research,
Uh-huh.
and I don't see any difference. I've been in I say I live in Paris or here in Canary Islands or even in Italy. They say it's really chaotic and no one respects the queue, but I haven't noticed that. I really noticed much of a difference. If you push in the queue in Paris, they go, Monsieur, they don't like it at all.
Mm.
In the boulangerie, no, I don't see any difference. I know we're super respectful for queues. Do you agree?
Um, I mean, maybe I don't know. Yeah, maybe there's just this idea that people uh, kind of go along with it more likely here, I suppose. People don't object so much. I don't know. Yeah, I have had situations in Italy where people haven't really respected it, but I guess that a lot of that would be kind of a bit regional rather than um, throughout the whole of Italy.
Hmm.
So yeah, I don't know. It's a curious one. I mean, I think there's one time when we don't queue at all is for the bus.
Oh
But
yeah.
we don't do that, do we?
No, but you kind of look around and see. You don't queue. There's no bus queue, but you look
No.
around to see who was there before you, don't you? Is that right? I don't get a bus that often in London.
Yeah,
So,
well, I don't know. Yeah, with the bus queue, I guess it doesn't really matter because there's not normally that many people getting on the bus anyway, and so it doesn't really matter.
yeah.
So, yeah, I don't know. Yeah, yeah, I agree though. I mean, certainly other countries, people generally respect queues. I mean, I remember in Russia at the airport, they didn't care at all. People just would, you know, I don't know, go through and make an excuse, and that was it.
Okay.
Which I found quite curious. But maybe that was just a particular situation. I don't know. I don't know if that was normal.
Okay, so there might be a tiny bit of truth in it, but not that much. Then you're saying.
Yeah. Well, yeah, but I think maybe, yeah, I don't know. Maybe countries in general have become more fond of queuing, and we've just stayed the same. Maybe that's it.
That's true. Is it be interesting to know how this epidemic has changed the world when we start having to, interact with each other in close proximity in the future? You will be better queuers or whatever.
Well, perhaps people have realised it's much better to stay 2 meters away in a queue because you don't have to make small talk about the weather. So, yeah.
It's strange in the Canary Islands because, maybe it's the same in Spain, but in some signs it says keep 1 meter apart, and there are other signs say come 1.5 meters, and there are others say 2 meters, and they won't make up their mind. There are different rules for different places, but I don't think it's because of the virus. The virus in this department store insists on 2 meters, but the virus here, it's just only 1 meter. Just
seems a bit strange. But that's to do with queuing as well.
I think it makes people more aware of the queues, though. They need to know where to stand. So it's changing. It's going to change the culture.
Yeah, well, I think I think people in general will more likely respect queues, won't they? It'd just be interesting to see if people continue to distance themselves in queues.
Yeah. Okay, moving on. English food is very bad.
We've spoken about this a few times, haven't we?
Yeah. Okay. Well, so briefly then, English food is bad, isn't it? This is what everyone says. Oh, I don't want to go to England because the food's bad.
Yeah, well, that's not true, is it? I mean, it probably was true in the 80s or 90s, I guess, in the sense that there wasn't the care and attention put on food, was there? But I mean, certainly since, I guess since the 90s, food has improved a tremendous amount in terms of restaurants, hasn't it?
I agree. I think one thing you can say about England, or London especially, because I spent most of my time in London, is that Londoners do foreign food very well. We don't eat that much English food. I don't know. I don't when I'm in London. I think, let's go for an English. I think maybe that's true. We don't actually eat that much. A little bit, but not that much. You usually go for, if you're in London, you go for something international.
Yeah, well, I think the stereotype comes from the idea that we don't celebrate our food in the same way other cultures do. I mean, the idea of having an English restaurant doesn't really exist, does it? You'd go to a pub. And I think often, which again, I think we've spoken about before, often the idea that food is not very good is because you maybe end up going to a chain restaurant or a chain pub maybe. Don't want to mention the chain pub in particular, but you know what the one I'm talking about, where it's very standard fare. But even that particular pub, it's not that bad. It's cheap and cheerful, but it's designed not to be necessarily amazing, isn't it?
And if it's cheap, often if the food isn't going to be that fresh, isn't it? It's going to be pre-prepared, microwaved, or whatever. So you get what you pay for in a way, don't you?
Yeah, very much so. I mean, I'd recommend to anybody to go to a gastropub.
Yeah,
a pub that specializes in food, and there's definitely good care and attention in terms of beer or ales and the like, if that is your thing. I mean, I often get people who come over to London and they really love the beer and enjoy that kind of culture. And there's a wide range of beers. There's lots of different beers that you can sample, which I think is a very nice thing.
You're making me nostalgic now.
You can come back.
We come back for the beer. Why do you come back? To be in lockdown for 3 months. So well, I came back. I came back for the beer.
Even though you can't go to a pub. Yeah.
Even though I can't go to a pub. Do they do takeaway?
I guess so. I suppose so. I'm not really sure.
Well,
Can
they're
they do
walking down the
takeaway at the
street
moment?
with pint of lagers. No,
Yeah.
pint of bitter.
I think some places you could possibly do it. Not really sure.
Okay.
Not tried recently.
I will send one by post to me.
I will.
Okay, DHL.
I will.
Next one. Oh, I love the English sense of humor.
Was that your German accent again?
It was a foreign accent. There was no non-specific foreign country.
Accent.
I just have this general foreign accent.
Mm.
So is it true English have a good sense of humor?
Yeah, I don't know. I think this is a curious one because I remember in Italy, the idea of having an English sense of humor was actually not seen as a positive thing, which I found curious. I don't know why. And nobody could really explain to me why. But yeah, it was seen as being a bit weird or a bit odd. It wasn't seen as being good.
Yeah. Yes, you remind me that like sometimes in the classroom I make a joke and sometimes, probably most times, people don't find it funny. And they look at each other and a bit bemused and say, "Oh, that is the English humor," and like, which is a polite way of saying that wasn't funny at all. I think.
Okay. Yeah. I don't know. I mean, I think the idea of British humor exists in every country. I mean, I would suggest that we're quite satirical, quite sarcastic, quite dark. But I think that kind of humor exists everywhere, doesn't it?
Yeah, I have a theory. You find funny people everywhere, of course. You'll agree with that wherever you go, and you find people have no sense of humor at all. But British TV and things like that, they're a bit more edgy. I think they're more likely to get something which is, should we say, risk taking that you'd never see. Again, I'm comparing to France. And on French TV, it's all very safe, the comedy, very, very safe. But I'm thinking, I know, going back, Monty Python, Blackadder, Peep Show, those sort of comedy, you probably wouldn't get through the filter in some countries.
Yeah, I mean, I think we've got lots of freedom when it comes to comedy in this country, don't we? And, I think that obviously, maybe that's the reason why British humor is seen as being quite unique because I would argue it's groundbreaking in the sense that it's almost a social commentary, isn't it, on what's happening at the moment. And yeah, you can take lots of risks and nobody's going to say anything about it, are they? I mean, very occasionally you get complaints from public, but I think it has to be quite extreme for that to happen.
Yeah. It used to be when you went abroad, it was like the 90s and things, maybe until recently, they say, "Oh, you're British. Oh, you're British. I love Mr. Bean." That was the first.
Okay. Yeah.
But I guess we like Mr. Bean, but it's not really what you first think of when you think of English comedy in England, anyway. But,
no, not at all. And I think Mr. Bean, obviously, it's a very international thing, isn't it? It's kind of slapstick comedy. And I think slapstick comedy is something that translates very well internationally, isn't it? But I think with Rowan Atkinson, who's the chap that plays Mr. Bean, I think most British people would relate to things like Blackadder, where he's very sarcastic and dark.
Yeah.
Whereas we would never relate to him typically as Mr. Bean, which I think is very, very interesting. Because, internationally, Mr. Bean, in Britain would be Blackadder, which I would recommend to any of the listeners to watch. Because
yes, if you don't know it, watch Blackadder. Yeah, that's funny. Love that.
Yeah. But it's funny because it is dark and sarcastic, isn't it?
Yeah.
Which I think Rowan Atkinson is very good at doing that, and also seeing the contrast between Mr. Bean and Blackadder just shows you how good he is as a performer, because there's such a difference.
Yeah, agreed. Okay, so move on from comedy. Got a couple more here. We are too polite. British people super polite. John, you polite? Don't remember you ever being polite.
Thank you very much.
People who make this cliche never met John. Oh, what are you doing here? That yeah, of course, I think British people are polite, but in terms of these polite, should we say, sort of salutations, I think in France beats everywhere. The French, so it's incredible when you buy like a coffee in France, that they would say, merci, bonne dégustation, bonne journée, au revoir. They'd give you 4 or 5 salutations just for you buying coffee. And in England, it's like, okay, here you are, thanks, bye, whatever. So, but in France, it's the whole level. And when you enter a shop, they will say, bonjour, and you leave, bonjour, yeah. But in England, you walk into a shop and no one says anything, apart from it's like a trendy clothes shop. When you leave, no one says anything. But so there's different, depends on the country. I think every country has polite people. And I think, yeah, we are polite, but I don't know if we're that much more than anywhere else. What do you think?
I think it's polite in different ways, isn't it? I mean, I think each country is polite in certain circumstances, aren't they? I mean, I think politeness in the UK can be quite an old-fashioned idea, isn't it? In the sense that maybe our parents' generation were more reserved in that respect. So I think politeness is often connected to some extent to tact.
Yeah.
If that's fair to say, where I've always been intrigued where a lot of foreigners would say, oh, well, you can never tell what the British are thinking because they're just too polite. And I think that's an interesting cultural point, because often I would say that's about tact and need to say something, because, I mean, yes, you could have a negative situation, but is there any point in commenting on it from a British point of view? Often we think, okay, fine, that's happened, but is there any point in saying anything about it? Because then you have a negative situation. I'm not sure if that's necessarily about politeness. It's about tact to some extent, isn't it?
Yeah. I'll just break in to remind you that if you're learning English and you want to listen to more of John's lovely voice, then head over to English with Monty, where you can hear John's podcast that'll help you improve your English. I think there might be a linguistic point as well here, because in English, because we don't have the to's and the voos and things like that, you have to speak in a more roundabout way. You have to use conditionals and stuff like that. So it sounds very polite. Would you mind doing this? I'd be very grateful. Would you like? So there's a lot of that in the English language. So to foreigner, where the language might be more direct, give me this. It could sound very polite.
Yeah, and I guess that's just the language, isn't it? The way the language is used. Yeah, because as you say, there's different ways of showing politeness, isn't there, in other languages, which are more formalized in a way, aren't they?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Okay, moving on.
No,
but
sorry, I just wanted to add something else. But if you go
ahead.
for tea with the Queen, at 5 o'clock in the afternoon, which is another cliche, you would have to say, may I go to the bathroom, rather than could I go to the bathroom, because that's obviously much more polite.
I'll remember that next time I'm having tea with the Queen, which is by coincidence is the very thing I'm talking about next. And is, we love tea, and we always drink tea at 4 p.m. Is it? I don't know. We love tea. British people love tea. They don't drink coffee. They love tea. And as someone, as you know, I'm kind of obsessed with coffee. I'm a big coffee drinker. I really love coffee. And I do like tea. Yeah. But I think maybe it used to be true that British people loved tea. But we're going back 30, 40, even more years. But recently, I think that's totally changed. And statistically, now British people do drink more coffee than tea. Do you agree?
Yeah. Yeah, I would agree with that. I mean, I think it's a generational thing, isn't it, to some extent? I mean, my parents would always drink tea.
Yeah, that's true. Are you?
And
You coffee?
yeah,
Coffee
normally
tea?
I would have coffee. I do go through phases where I do drink tea, but yeah, normally I would have coffee.
That's one of the things I miss about London, actually, is the coffee, believe it or not. Because I'm here in the Canary Islands, in Gran Canaria, and there are only two good cafes which sells real good quality coffee and good quality milk. Because most cafes they just use this plastic milk, not fresh milk, UHT milk, which tastes disgusting in coffee, and they use bad quality coffee. So there's only two places I found on a website which does good. But in London, it's really your spot for choice. So, and in Spain generally, it's pretty mediocre, shall we say? So really, the opposite is true. I think London is a great place for coffee and tea. So come here when you can after the epidemic and enjoy your food, tea, and coffee.
Yeah, definitely. I think with coffee though, you'd probably have to choose wisely in terms of where you go. I mean, I've had Italians on a few occasions remark at how bad the coffee is in London, and I'm always puzzled by that idea because it's like, well, clearly you haven't been to somewhere good. And I think the difference
Yeah.
is, you know, in Italy you'd go everywhere and the quality has to be very good. Whereas here you have to know where to go.
Well, I kind of disagree with you because
Yeah.
I lived for a time in Italy and the coffee was good, I agree, but rarely great,
Okay.
rarely
Okay.
amazing.
Mm.
Uh, uh, there was like this traditional Italian coffee, which is a good standard. Yeah, I agree, better than the standard in other parts of Europe. However, I think in the last like 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, maybe, there are this sort of third generation of cafes that have opened up in major European cities and that take coffee to another level and really much better. That's my humble humble opinion.
Okay.
But
And
using really good quality beans, good quality water, good quality milk,
mm.
and it really takes it to a different level.
And where were you in Italy when you spent your time in Italy?
I was in Perugia.
Ooh, okay. Yeah.
I spent some time in Rome and other parts of Italy as well. Yeah. No, it was very good. It was good, but not amazing. You disagree
Yeah.
with me?
No, well, I don't know. I think it's a tricky one. I mean, I think it depends. One element that I kind of get a little bit frustrated in somewhere like Italy is it's quite difficult for them to change things. I mean, somewhere like Bologna, where I lived, is pretty good in the respect that they would try new things and you could get interesting things that perhaps in other parts of Italy you wouldn't get. So, I mean, when I went a
Okay.
few years ago with my American friends, an American couple, and you can get like iced coffee in Bologna, which is, you know, relatively easy to get. Whereas I would argue in other parts of Italy, you wouldn't. Um, I think yeah, that's just kind of a very traditional staid idea quite often of how you should be. So often there isn't a progressive idea as to something evolving and something getting better. It's like, okay, this is like this, and therefore it has to stay like this.
Mm,
And for me, that was an element that I found a little bit frustrating because it's like, well, yes, but you could make it even better.
yeah. Yeah. That's a good point.
So, yeah.
I guess we could have a whole nother show, or maybe another podcast about where maybe this is past our remit, but about Italian cliches. There's a lot of things about Italy and other cliches, which maybe like, for example, I know pizzas. I was surprised. I went to where I lived in Italy. I thought, wow, there are some great pizzas in Italy, but there are some very bad ones as well. I thought, how's it possible to have bad pizza in Italy? But yeah, wherever you go, you get good and bad. People who know how to cook, people who know how to make coffee, people who don't. So yeah, quite a few
Yeah.
cliches we could tackle elsewhere as well.
Yeah, definitely. And yeah. I mean, that's true of each country, isn't it? Really, but it's yeah. I mean, I used to find in Italy often it was about whether it was a tourist area as well. If it's a tourist area, the idea of finding good food was pretty difficult, and it was normally expensive.
But that covers
Which
about 90% of Italy, doesn't it?
no, well, no, no. I mean,
Okay,
I just
I'm
mean
exaggerating. I'm
very,
exaggerating.
yeah, but very central areas, as in the
Yeah,
very typical areas where
yeah,
tourists would go. So,
yeah, yeah. It's true. You're right. Okay, I've got one more, and I think this one is gonna be controversial.
ooh,
We may have different opinions.
ooh.
British people love the Queen and the royal family.
Okay, it's going to be interesting if you have differing opinions.
Well, shall I state mine? I'm not.
I'm sure your opinion is probably quite similar to mine, but
Okay.
go ahead.
Why the hell do we need a royal family? Why have we got right the 2020? Why the hell have we got a royal family? Who wants it? No. And how does this? But I'm sure she's a very nice person, the Queen. She was very nice. She invited me around to tea. But why have we got one? And you know what? She's born into this position. The palaces and things. And oh, by the way, it's not about money. It's not about money, because if you're going to have a royal family, yeah, they've got to have the what are they called, the palaces and stuff. You can't have them living in a 2-bedroom apartment in Peckham. No, they've got to have that. But why do we need them? It's not democratic. No, so I'm totally against the royal family. We want a republic. Give someone else the chance to be a president, just as a figurehead. I don't know, as someone
Yeah.
who's done something for the country, like David Beckham, or I don't know.
Oh my God. That's not a good alternative, is it?
So, and I would say, just let me get my pennies worth in, John. I would say that my opinions are shared by perhaps about 30%, 35% of the population. I do agree that maybe sort of 60% are royalists in the UK, but there is a large minority of people who don't agree with the royal family. And you never see this. I watch French TV, and you never, ever see anyone talking about the fact that, well, we don't all agree with the royal family. We don't think it's necessary. So I've got my pennies in the. What about you, John?
Well, I would agree with you on the idea that 35% of people would feel the same way as you. But I wouldn't agree with you on the idea that over 60% of the people would be royalists. I mean, I would suggest that you'd probably, again, have about 35% of people who are
Interesting.
really passionate. I mean, I personally would say that I fall into the category, which you haven't mentioned, is where I'm quite indifferent to the idea.
Yeah.
Because I think that's interesting that you have a very passionate point of view, and I'm sure you could have a very nice 5 o'clock tea session with Jeremy Corbyn to discuss this. But
Yeah.
for me, I'm quite indifferent. I mean, I can see the benefits of having the royal family in terms of it being a brand. I think economically it's very good for the country because it is like a brand. So therefore, it generates a lot of money for the country in terms of tourism as being a brand and an idea of
Do you
being
think
British.
tourists, really, John, do you think tourists come, oh, we must go to England because they have a royal family? We might, on the off chance, meet the Queen or Prince somebody or other.
No, well, not to that extent, but I think people buy into the idea of what Britishness is and relate it to the royal family. So, for me, for example, when there's the Queen's Jubilee and, something to do with the royal family, I don't think that harms us internationally. I think that's something that people see as being something that is quintessentially British, or something that is like our brand. So I think, I don't know, yeah, they were talking about when George was born that it automatically earned the country £6 billion for, I don't know how they worked that out.
For them.
No, for the country in general. I don't know how they worked that out
Okay,
and how they came to that conclusion. But I thought that was an interesting thing. But also, the reason why I don't think we should have a republic is because I think diplomatically it really helps. I think having people in a position of power who don't have a political agenda, I think really helps diplomatically. So I think
Yeah, but you can have a figurehead president, as many countries do. Just somebody, you know, I know, mathematician or something that's a footballer who's done something for the country, or whatever. But why should it be somebody who's just born into it? And
well,
can I
yeah,
say,
and
okay, go ahead.
yeah, no, and I agree with that idea. But I think a lot of the thing is it's about longevity as well. The fact that the Queen has been on the throne for that period of time means that when prime ministers come and go, you know, whether this will be true of the next monarch, I don't know, but certainly this Queen is known for being quite smart and knowing quite a lot of things. So the fact that she's been on the throne for a long time and speaks to the new prime minister and says, "Oh yeah, no, I know this guy. Yeah, I've met him about 10 times. He's a really good bloke. I can, you know, put him in contact with you." And we've had a few discussions about the state of the world, and, you know, I can tell you what he thinks and things like that. So I think having that longevity means that there is knowledge that a figurehead president wouldn't have, because they wouldn't be in the role for such a long period of time, but also means that they have had a diplomatic relationship, which is slightly different as well from a president. So therefore, when other members of state from other countries are speaking to them, I think they are almost speaking to them in a very neutral way.
Yeah, okay, that's a fair point. However, however, I think when you're doing things, you know, on a hereditary basis, you're giving someone the role of head of state on a hereditary basis, then you're taking risks. And I remind you of Edward the Eighth. It was Edward the Eighth who um, who resigned as, is that the word, resign, you say?
Abdicated, isn't it?
Abdicated, yeah. So, who abdicated. He was a Nazi. He was a Nazi. He married Mrs. Simpson, and they went on honeymoon to Nazi Germany, where they met Mr. Hitler. Was it 1937? I'm not sure when it was. But yeah, he was a Nazi. And if Hitler had invaded Britain, they would have put him back as a puppet head king. So you're leaving things to chance. Yeah.
Well, yeah, very much so. But I suppose to a certain
That's why
extent,
he was kicked out, by the way, not because of this ridiculous, like, romantic story of marrying Mrs. Wallace Simpson. No, that's all Hollywood. No, the real reason was because he was passing on secrets to the German embassy. Yeah.
sure, but that tells you something, though, doesn't it? It shows you that I think there's an idea that in this country, from an international perspective, some people feel that the monarchy has a lot of power in the United Kingdom, and that probably demonstrates the fact that it doesn't really. It is just a figurehead, isn't it? You know, if we wanted to put the Queen in prison, I guess we probably could, right?
You're reading my mind. No, no, I'm joking. I like the Queen. I'm sure she's a lovely person. No, but by the way, I just want to clarify one. But people assume when you say I'm a Republican, I don't with the royal family, they assume you're a Marxist Leninist, you're extreme left. No, I'm not actually. I'm sort of, you know, middle of the road politics. I don't think it's anything to do with left or right. It's just a question of what you think is democratic. But it's just my opinion. I think a lot of people, when we talk about this podcast about cliches, and I think you might agree, we might have different opinions to some extent, but not everybody is crazy about the royal family. That's certainly not true.
Well, it's interesting because I don't think I've met anybody who's crazy about the royal family. So it always really surprises me when we have these kind of, I don't know, occasions where we're very patriotic towards the royal
Oh,
family.
you know what, John? I was a few years ago. I tell you, there was a jubilee or some royal celebration. I can't remember. And I was accidentally, believe it or not, I was accidentally in central London. I was coming home from another event, and I was in the middle of the crowd celebrating this royal event, and everyone was foreign. There were a few people from the north of England. All I heard was like foreign people
There you
went
go.
out to celebrate.
It's a
Yeah, it was
brand.
tourists enjoying
It's a
it.
brand.
But yeah, exactly. But I think most British people, they were just at home. What's going on here? I don't know. I can't get home. There's so much traffic. What's going on? And that was Jubilee. Oh, really? Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
So, John, let me ask you a difficult question. If these cliches are not true, what are we like? What are the British like?
Don't know.
I think some things are true. I think British people are quite open-minded to a large extent. We're an island nation, and also so a little bit open-minded, but at the same time, a bit suspicious about other places. We like to be different. I think that's true of a lot of people from island nations. And I think we like to be a bit sarcastic more than other. They don't get the humour, is a bit sarcastic. Like we're like taking the piss, an expression which doesn't even exist in some other languages. I think that's true. And can you add to my list?
Yeah. And I'm trying to think what I should say now.
I'll add something though, because somebody told me, which I didn't realize. I never realized until recently. I asked somebody about what is your experience of England. Somebody's lived in England for a long time, and she said, English people always keep frozen peas in the freezer.
I don't.
You don't?
No, there's always an exception, right?
I think it might be an exception, but okay, you are an exception, John, because in a non-scientific survey, I did that, and that is kind of true, and I didn't realize that. It didn't cross my mind.
Oh, there's always exceptions that prove the rule, right? So,
and yes, true. Another thing I should say, which is true, which I like in England, is that admin is generally much less in other countries. In France and other cases, always like lots of forms to fill in and lots of bureaucracy. In England, seems to have done away with a lot of it. A lot of it's word of mouth. Even the Constitution. Even the Constitution's unwritten.
Yeah, that's true.
Oh, yeah, the Constitution. What's that bit again? Oh, yeah, I can't remember. No, can you ask somebody if they can remember the Constitution? Yeah, it's unwritten.
Yeah, but, and that causes problems in some situations, doesn't it?
Yeah. I think just to sum up, I would say that these stereotypes, these cliches, make the world an easier place. It simplifies the world. But in reality, I think not just talking about English, talking about whichever nationality. No, don't come into a new relationship, a new interaction with these stereotypes in your mind. It's always important to judge everybody with a sort of clean slate from nothing. Just judge the person on who they are, and don't make assumptions about what they're like because of their country, the color of their skin, their religion. No, forget about it. Just judge them.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's, as you say, it's wiping the slate clean, isn't it? And not having those kind of ideas, isn't it? Or make jokes out of it, have fun about it. I mean, I think.
Yeah, you can tease people about it. Yeah, I don't have any problem with that. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think these ideas of stereotypes are nice to have a bit of fun about it, and yeah, especially if I think generally people do have a bit of fun with it and say, oh yeah, English people always drink tea, don't they? And it's like, yeah, Italians always eat pizza, don't they? Just having a bit of fun, because
it's true, but sometimes it can become nasty. Obviously, tea drinking is not nasty, but when you're talking about different nationalities, there are some very negative stereotypes, and so yeah, you have to be careful about that.
Yeah, sure. But I would like to hope, particularly face to face. I mean, in my experience, I don't know about you, but face to face, I've never really experienced nastiness between people, which I find very, very comforting. And makes me feel positive about the world in general, because, you know, I think face-to-face interactions, people are very nice and civil and are not nasty. I mean, I think often these things just happen in the online world, don't they?
Possibly. Yeah.
Or maybe I'm being naive, or people are just nice when they're around me. I don't know.
So online, on the online world, yes. So I was just thinking of some of the comments I get on my YouTube channel,
saying how wonderful you are, your wonderful, beautiful hair, and you know.
No, it's straight. It's very funny because I also get these comments because obviously I'm not blonde and I don't have blue eyes. I have a sort of, as a mixed heritage, but people, they have these cliches and they say, they look at the video and goes, he's not English. I could hear an Indian accent. He's not fooling me. I could hear his Indian accent. I go, what are you talking about? Or
I definitely can't hear your Indian accent.
Yeah, no. When the way he said the R's, it was definitely an Indian R.
You're like,
really? And, worse than that, yes, yeah.
Okay.
We'll go into that another time.
Curious. Yeah.
Okay, John, thank you. Now's your moment in the sun to plug your stuff. Tell the listeners about your podcast or whatever.
The moment in the rain. And yes, my podcast is English with Monty. Please take a look, or you shouldn't take a look, take a listen, I should say, because my podcast is about the English language as well, but it's slightly different to Gideon's. Maybe more focusing a bit more on grammar and experiences in London, I would say.
Okay, thank you, John. And I remind you to watch Let Them Talk TV, our YouTube channel, and take care, everybody.
Yeah, take care. See you soon.
Bye.
Bye.